What baffles me is that in the media, right, in Bible stories, in the media generally, God is always, anytime God is being depicted, right, they always show this old guy that is like, very old. He's always looking very old and like unkempt with a lot of beard and I'm like, that doesn't even make sense when you think about it, because if it's truly God, right, the first problem he's going to solve is the problem of aging, right? Think billionaires on earth, right? All the billionaires on earth, right, they are trying their best to reverse aging, right? And with varying degrees of success, right? So the second you have power, the first thing you want to stop is the effect of time on yourself. Do you understand? So in trying to like imagine what God would look like, I don't think he's going to look old and haggard and like he's been depicted in the media. Even there's this, being depicted in the media, right? And also I think, and a reason why there's a metaphoric side to his depiction in the media too, which I think is, the Bible calls him like the ancient of days, and he's timeless, and so in a way too. So I think they try to like anthropomorphize all those things, and show this being that looks very old and like this old looking being. Do you understand? And I don't think he looks anything like that. In fact, the Bible talks about when he appeared to Moses. The Bible says there was like the mountains, or like there was thunder, there was smoke, there was all these effects, and then a still small voice. Still small voice. Like, so in my head, man, I think maybe God looks like maybe he has a boyish look. Maybe he looks like a teenager, like a 20-year-old teenager. Do you understand? Just like very calm, very unassuming, it looks like someone you can just like, it looks like a walkover. And that will make sense because, the Bible talks about Satan and the angels of God, and Lucifer essentially, and the angels of God, if successfully convincing a third of the angels of God. Like, when you think about that shit is just mind-blowing. Yeah. And the only way you could actually successfully convince them is that, they just didn't think God could have put up like a very serious fight. For them to switch allegiances like that, they must have just looked at, we are all these big, massive angels with wings. We are very fast. And this guy just always sitting down on his throne every day. And he looks like a 20-year-old boy. And his voice is very calm. Like, he just looks like something you just like push over in a second, right? Yeah. Do you understand? So I believe that must have been like, and being that, Satan the Bible says we walk by faith and not by sight. Satan, on the other hand, he does the opposite of that. He just walks by sight. Do you understand? So he must have sized God up, like, and be like, the war in heaven is not even going to last 5 minutes, and then we're going to, like, I'm going to, as he said, he's going to exalt his throne. Yeah. The same thing with Adam and Eve too. With Adam and Eve, like, the serpents successfully convincing Adam and Eve to like disobeying God. It didn't take much. It was like, did God really say that you should eat that food? So essentially, I'm just like, I don't want to make this thing long. It's just something that popped into my head now, that because I was scrolling on YouTube, and all of a sudden I saw this like image of like a face in a cloud, and I read the captions, and it was God, and I was like, why do we even think why do we think God looks like that? Like, why? Like, why? If he's God, like, aging will be the first problem we solve. There's no billionaire on earth that has not solved the aging, that does not will gladly give up like a good chunk of their wealth to stop aging. Right? So I just wanted to like talk about stuff like that, and why I don't think the depiction of God in the media makes any sense. I just wanted to add that even like Jesus also had that problem of not being taken seriously. The Pharisees just didn't think he was a Messiah. After like he worked all kinds of miracles, he did all sort of things, but they just couldn't wrap their head around him being a Messiah, because the looks, it was not like, he was not messianic in his look. He just looked like a very regular guy, like a regular family guy, They couldn't take him very, very seriously. And then Jesus died at the age of 33. He never like grew, and Jesus was always saying like, if you've seen me, you have seen the Father, because Philip was towards the end of like the ministry of Jesus, right? When the disciples were like, Jesus should just like, Philip was like, Jesus should just show them the Father. That's all they asked for. And Jesus was like, well, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. Like, look, this is exactly what the Father looks like. And they could not wrap their head around it. And mind you, so maybe that's why Jesus died at the age of 33. Maybe at maximum, maybe the looks of God is just like highest. Maybe it looks like at best, yeah, like a 33-year-old guy. You understand? But I even doubt it. I think he looks probably like it looks like Peter Pan. I think God probably looks like Peter Pan, and that will make sense because like Moses, right? The only person that saw God. Moses was like, I want to see God, and then God showed himself to Moses, and it was like, you won't see my face, but you see me, my rear view. You see me from behind, right? And Moses did see God from behind, and then what was the next thing he did? Well, God was like, Moses, speak to the rock and water will come out. And then the next thing, he grabbed like a stick, and instead of just speaking to the rock, he struck the rock. Yeah, he beat the rock. That is like insubordination of the highest order. So why would somebody do that to like God? Why would you like? Well, because he didn't take God seriously. God, when you see God, you probably wouldn't take him seriously. Explains why Satan thought he could overthrow him. Lucifer thought he could overthrow him. Explains why when Cain killed Abel and God was like, Cain, where's your brother? He was like, I'm not my brother's keeper. What kind of stupid question is that? Why would you talk to God like that? Because it looks like a teenager. So yeah, maybe God probably looks like Peter Pan. Yeah, I don't want to make this thing very long, but yeah, maybe God looks like Peter Pan. I've never seen him, I'm just saying. And then in contrast, right? Yeah, in contrast, when you look at like, even Jesus, right? Again, when he like resurrected, right? The first person that saw him after his resurrection, this is like full-blown Jesus, full-blown power, full-blown everything, like 100%, yeah? The first person that saw him was Mary Magdalene, and she didn't think, the Bible says she thought he was a gardener. How would you think he looks as a gardener? What would you think, like, so she didn't even think he looked like God, or he looked like, she didn't even say like a governor or Pilate or Caesar. She was like, no, gardener. He looked like a gardener, right? And then when you take that, so like, even, so she didn't, again, Jesus still looked unassuming, right? And then when you take that and then you contrast it with like angels, right? Like in the whole Bible, like nobody disrespects angels, right? Like the first time you see them, the first thing they say is like, do not be afraid, yeah? And then when you look at the conversation, when you analyze the conversation that follows between the angel and the human being, right? It's usually very well-mannered, very respectful. Like nobody disrespects them. Like throughout the Bible, there's no instance of disrespect. Meanwhile, if you look at the Bible, there's a lot of disrespect with God. Cain, like everybody that's like a little bit familiar with God, the next thing is disrespect. Cain, disrespect. I'm not my brother's keeper. Why are you asking me that kind of stupid question? Moses saw the back of God. Next thing is is striking a rock like with a rod, like Mary Magdalene calling Jesus a gardener. Like ridiculous shit. So again, I'm not saying that's what God looks like. I'm just saying all the evidence in the Bible just like points in a different, the way, like I said, the way God has been depicted in the media as this old guy that looks like, this old guy that has like hair and is just always sitting down, like this ancient looking guy. I think it's the opposite of that, At least that's what the Bible suggests. Yeah. So maybe God looks like Peter Pan. I don't know. I don't know, man. I wouldn't know. I'm just guessing. But that's what it looks like in the Bible. That is exactly what it looks like. Yeah, so that's it. But I get why like religious people would want to like depict God as this guy that like looks, because it doesn't make sense for organized religion to serve a God that looks like a boy. Do you understand? It makes now. It kind of makes sense now because knowledge is increasing and everything, and then there's all this craze about Ozempic and like reversing aging, and like people are starting to see aging as like a problem. Back in those days, aging was not seen as a problem. Aging was seen as something to look forward to. In this world, aging is seen as a disease, right? So like the idea of in like the olden days, right? The idea of like industrial age and before that, right? The idea of a god that looked ancient and old made a lot of sense because a lot of people didn't even grow old, right? I think life expectancy was like, I don't know, 30, 25 in those times, right? So is it that you died by war or life expectancy was very, very small. It wasn't a lot, right? So it made sense to think of God as somebody that, even against all the evidence in the Bible, right? It made sense to think of God as somebody that lived for like 100, 200 years, like looked ancient essentially, because it was an aspiration, if you will. But I think the tables have kind of turned in the modern world where people don't want to age anymore. People want to stay young. Again, for the nth time, Ozempic, every billionaire that you know is trying to like reverse aging. There's a lot of talk about like if you can't reverse aging, at least slowing it down. Do you understand? So I think I think in a few years, right, to become more acceptable, because this one I just said now, it sounds like blasphemy, right? Especially to like a very religious person, right? But I think as time goes on, right, in the media, right, maybe when we finally like solve the problem of aging, right? Maybe when science finally solves aging and people don't age anymore, which is probably going to happen at some point. Yeah, I think it will be more acceptable to depict God as the way like the Bible depicts him, which is like this unassuming, very, it looks like a pushover, but actually has all the power in the world type of guy. Yeah, that's it. Actually, and I wanted to add that I think the whole thing is flipped, right, when you think about it, because the person that is actually old from like biblical evidence is actually Satan, because the Bible calls Satan old. I think in Revelations it was like that old serpent. Yeah. So anytime God, and Bible says like the devil always like appears as an angel of light, which means he always tries to appear youthful. He always tries to appear like looking nice and So I think the person that actually aged is actually Satan, right? So anytime you on your screen you see like a old looking God, right? I think he flipped it essentially. He flipped the script. Anytime Satan is depicted, it's shown like this youthful guy with horns, always smiling, and then when they show God, they show this old raggedy guy. And then even in churches, in tabernacles, in like churches around the world, right? You see like when you enter all these beautiful churches, you see all these mosaic paintings of like glass mosaics, and then the God that he depicts there looks old, like this old guy, like Michelangelo's like painting. Or maybe it wasn't Michelangelo. There's a painting where like a man is, I've forgotten the name. The man is stretching his finger, and then God too is stretching his finger. The God in that painting, and they're almost touching each other. The God in that painting looks very old, right? He looks like very old and haggard, right? Right. So we're still back to that depicting God as old. But if you look at the Bible, it's actually Satan that is like, that's actually old, because the Bible says Satan is like the ancient serpent, that old serpent, right? That's one instance, and then he calls him the father of lies. Like he's always referring to him as like an old person, right? So I think it's like a flipped thing. It's like Satan like flipped the script on everybody, and then making God look old. Whereas meanwhile, God looks like a 20-year-old guy, and then Satan looks like, he makes himself look like young. Meanwhile, he's the one that looks old. Wild stuff.